Okay, so today, really quick, it's Sunday morning, and I really should be asleep, but I work nights, and so on the weekend I'm wide awake. And I wanted to do something really quick, which is talk about my problems with evolution. One of the things that has been true for a while is everyone, when they find out I'm a creationist, assumes that I'm just taking the Bible's word, and that's the limit of my thought process, or that I don't know anything. Um, well, let me tell you about my primary problem with evolutionary theory. And one of the easiest one to throw at you is actually my problem with math. Okay, so probability statistics, in order to get a set sequence of numbers, you have the odds of each individual sequence and they multiply, right? So if I want 1 over 4, right? And we do this all the time in gaming. I'm a huge nerd. I just got done GMing like 6 hours of role playing games. Is what I do. One of the things I do to unwind during the weekends. So, but if I need to get on a four side, if I need to multiply, if I need to get a 4 and a 4, right? If I need to roll an 8 on 2d4 for D&D, then the odds get processed by multiplication. So we have 1 times 4, and then 1 times 4, 1 times, right? And the result of that is not 1 over 8 or 2 over 4, but it's 1 over 16. Same thing, if I need to get 3 specific results in a row, then the odds go up a lot, right? So if I need to go 1 over 4 by 1 over 4, so I need to roll a 12 on 3 four-sided dice. Then I get 1 over 64. And you see, just adding one more bit of data, that number goes way up really fast. All right, so life is written on DNA, and let's keep things really, really simple. There's four different bits of data that you can have on DNA, right? G, A, T, or P, and I'm keeping it really simple. So for G, A, T, or P, the odds of getting the one that I want on each individual thing, if random chance puts it together, right? It isn't designed, isn't engineered, it just bumps together and I need the right one in the right order, I have a 1 in 4 chance of getting which element of DNA that I want. Right? I'm using layman's terms, I'm keeping it really simple because I'm just trying to explain the problem. So we showed you that it gets exponentially harder the more numbers I need. So the next thing I needed to learn when I was questioning whether or not you could have the first DNA molecule make itself is how long does it have to be, right? Then I can calculate the odds on whether or not I think it's reasonable to assume it happened. It's fair, right? We're talking about whether or not something was created. So asking about whether or not it's possible for it to be created seems to be a fair fair question, right? So I looked up and at first I was looking at viruses, but the problem is viruses don't replicate themselves. Viruses hijack another living organism to replicate. So we can't use viruses, which would have been cut the numbers down really well. But to the very first organism that could make itself so it could mutate, so it could make more complicated things, we're not going to get into the math of breaking it in a good way because we're just keep it real simple. We just want it to begin, right? Just step one. Just give me step one. I just want the answer of how probable is it to do step one. And so I did some digging. What is the shortest DNA sequence that has a metabolism, right? It can process things from the outside, it gathers resources, it makes another one of itself, right? It can reproduce. You need to reproduce for the whole process of evolution. I'm not talking about the Bible, I'm just looking at a scientific question. So I was, because if you get, I heard a mathematician say that the shortest amount of reproducing code is 144 bits long. Is 144 bits long, but that doesn't quite plug in because if everything that I can enter is a letter or a number, it's way more options for combinations than I have. Like if I'm writing computer code, I have way more options for each individual entry in the line of code than you have with just the 1 over 4 of DNA. So it was the shortest amount of DNA to make a living organism that can reproduce so that magical chance could make it reproduce into something else without, instead of just, dying. And so I did some digging, and the smallest living strand of DNA that has a metabolism, right, that it can make itself, is Candidatus carcinella rudii, and that is 159,662 base pairs. All right. So we looked at, if I need to get three things in order, the odds are 1 in 64. So in order to get, by random chance, and this assumes we have all of these DNA parts. I'm just taking all of the DNA, the component molecules to make DNA. We're just going to say they're a block, even though they're 50 times more complicated than that. We're just going to say a block. We're really cheating to make it more favorable and more probable for DNA to happen. So mathematically, you get 1 over 4 to the power of 159,662. Right? Make sense? Does that seem kind of... Let's put this in perspective here. That number doesn't exist. I have for engineering and physics for college, and calc-based physics, I had to buy an engineering calculator. It cost me like $130. Put it on, plugged it in, turned it on. I threw this in, and it said error overflow. It couldn't calculate this. So I looked it up I used a web-based algorithm where they have a more advanced server than my little calculator, and I plugged this in. Just what is this? Not what is 1 over this, but what is just this number? And it said infinity. It rounded it up to infinity. So mathematically, the odds of the very first DNA molecule happening by chance, even assuming we could do this again and again and again and again and again, and all of the molecules could hit each other at the same time, all the time. So we had the perfect soup in the perfect conditions, the perfect temperatures, where these things weren't degrading, and they had enough molecular energy to be, to be impacting, so they can come together again. All of the right circumstances, and we basically sum it up. That is equal to 1 over infinity. So I'm going to get some calculus to you. All right, so you can sum it up. This if you're learning like grade school math, junior high math, they're going to tell you can't divide something by infinity. But once we get into calculus and we get into the idea of limits, as you get closer and closer, so if I divide, here's my graph and I'm plotting, I'm going to erase this, right? And teach you a little bit of calculus really quick. The idea of limits. So, got my graph and I'm plotting my function. I'm drawing upside down. Give me a break. Right? So if I have like 1 and so here's x equals 1, or here's y equals 1 as a function of x. Okay, x. I've never tried to draw a y upside down, and it's really hard. Right? You tell I'm not a teacher. So as this goes and we start dividing it, the bigger the number we're dividing, the bigger number we're dividing 1 by, the lower and lower, lower and lower and lower the result goes. You can see sooner or later it's just going to fall off the map. It just goes down. We hit as we approach infinity, the number approaches way. I'm doing this graph wrong. Graph of 1 over x is. Okay, I'm so busy trying to write x and y that I did the graph wrong, which is brilliant. Alright, so here's y. I'm doing it again. Here's x. Alright, and I'm going to draw it regular. Function f of x, 1 over x. When we're dividing by something that's almost 0, it comes all the way up, almost to infinity. And when x is 1, we're at 1. And then it comes all the way down. And the further we go towards infinity, the further closer and closer and closer and closer we go towards 0. Really hope you can see that. So as we take this huge number for the first DNA, the odds go to nothing, right? And when you're looking at, and again, just basically one of the things calculus does is when you get so close to this limit that you can't calculate, it's effectively zero. It's so close to zero that it doesn't matter. There's no way that it not being zero will impact anything. And so you have 1 over n, whatever your number is, as n approaches zero, as n approaches infinity, then our function, 1 over whatever our number is, as n gets closer and closer to infinity, then f of x gets closer and closer to 0. And we have a number in 1/4 to the 159,662nd power is 0. It's nothing. And that's my first problem with evolution. You can talk about ages and dates, and there's all that other stuff. But my primary problem, when I gave myself the permission to ask the question, does this scientific theory make sense according to science, I couldn't get past the math for step 1. And that's when I started looking for other explanations in terms of math and why I gave myself permission to look at other things. And I found more and more and more evidence that convinced me of creationism. I'm not the only person who grew up an evolutionist and became a creationist when we dared to look at the evidence. And I know there's people who have gone the other way. Usually they get to college and they hear what professors who don't believe listen, and then they change over. And then they never re-examine it. So that's my primary problem with evolution. Primary problem with evolution, as me personally, as a Christian, God said would be enough, right? Because God is above the rules. You can look at the rules all you want. Somebody who can break the rules, it doesn't matter. You can't detect what can happen when you break the rules by looking at the rules. A guy I follow on YouTube, he was playing through the original Doom like a month ago, and I played the hell out of that when I was in college. I really loved that game, but you can't tell what's possible in Doom if you don't know the cheat codes, right? The most famous one was you typed in IDKFA and it gave you all the guns and all the ammo, and everybody, when we discovered that, oh my gosh, that you could just crank it up to the highest setting and turn off the lights and turn on the surround sound speakers, freak yourself out, and just play the hell out of Doom. Because you could just and shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot, and it was okay because you could just type the code in again to get all the infinite ammo. And that's something that isn't possible just looking at the normal rules of Doom. Similarly, I don't really look at creation and evolution just by what's natural and observable, but I can look at what is natural and observable and see if it fits with what's claimed. And, is that a valid claim? Is this a valid claim? I can look at that, and that's why I came down off of it. But step 1, right, when I first started to dig into this, the math broke my faith in science. And once I could question my faith in science the same way that I questioned my faith in Christianity, then I was able to move on. And there are way better educated people than me who go further than this. Hydrogeologists, biologists. I've got 3 DVDs from a guy who was teaching college. So he taught scientists. He was a scientist who made scientists, and he had enough students ask him to question this stuff. And when he did, he eventually became a Christian, just off of the mathematical problems and the other biological problems of irreducible complexity and complex structures. And that goes a little bit beyond my expertise, and I can refer people to more competent people, and I can make kind of layman's arguments about it and discuss it. But my fundamental issue with evolution, and I didn't open a Bible, right? I didn't preach. I haven't taken collection. I'm not asking you to donate to my Patreon page for Jesus. What I'm really doing is just saying, I looked at the math and I started to have a problem. And when I realized I have a problem and there wasn't an answer for this problem, it was just said, well, that's not a problem. It's kind of like in a horror movie. Oh no, there's nothing under the bed. I'll be right back. I'll just go walk off by my own. saying something isn't true doesn't make it not true. You have to actually look and see what's represented in reality. And mathematics describes our understanding of reality. Um, and so math counts. And for me, math counts. And it's one of the reasons why I'm a creationist. So I wanted to explain that, wanted to lay that out there. Again, no Bible passages were used in the making of this video. Just one insomniac who talks too much. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed it. God bless.